So what holds those atoms together in a compound? They're held together by chemical bonds. And all chemical bonds come from attractions between opposite electrical charges. But they come about in a slightly different way, and so we can categorize chemical bonds into two broad categories: ionic bonds and covalent bonds. So ionic bonds occur between metals and nonmetals, and they involve the transfer of electrons from one atom to another. So metals tend to lose electrons. They will transfer an electron to the nonmetal. The result is you have a positive metal cation and a negative nonmetal anion, and then those are attracted to each other. The attraction of those oppositely charged particles is the ionic bond. In the solid phase, ionic compounds are composed of a lattice, meaning we have alternating positive and negative ions, and those are arranged in 3 dimensions. Here we have an illustration of that. Sodium, metal, and chlorine gas, both of those are deadly. Here we have individual sodium atoms and little chlorine molecules. We'll talk about why it does that later. What happens when these react is the neutral sodium atom with 11 electrons loses one of its electrons. A chlorine atom with 17 electrons gains that electron. The result is a sodium ion and a chloride ion. These opposite charges attract. And so they will fit together in alternating pattern here, positive and negative, to maximize the attractions between the opposite charges and minimize the repulsions between like charges. The result is table salt, which in reasonable quantities is actually good for you. We sprinkle it on our food all the time. One of my things I'd like to get across to every chemistry student is a chemical is not necessarily bad, right? Chemicals aren't evil, right? Because everything is a chemical, really. And natural things are not all safe, and man-made things are not all toxic. And actually, everything is toxic at some level. Oxygen, too much oxygen will kill you, but not enough oxygen will also kill you, right? So it's all about moderation. So you require a reasonable amount of sodium chloride to live. That was just an aside. Covalent bonds, covalent meaning sharing. So the co prefix means sharing, and valent, we're sharing valence electrons. These bonds occur between two or more nonmetals. We don't get an ionic bond forming here because the nonmetals want to gain electrons, and neither of them is willing to lose an electron, so we can't form any positive ions. So instead, they share the electrons. Covalently bound atoms compose a molecule, and each of those molecules is independent of the other molecules. So we call these molecular compounds. And here we see that when that shared electron is off to the side, either up here or over here, that is not the maximum attraction. The maximum attraction is when the shared electron is between the two nuclei. This is a lower potential energy state. It's more stable. And so this brings the two atoms together. We will learn a lot more about bonding in a later chapter.